always challenging to be just before lunch. And as you saw, it's a fireside chat, so we managed to adjust the weather just in time to make it proper for a fireside, not 28 degrees that we had yesterday. So happy to be here with Serge Jorgensen from Crowe. A little more than a year ago, last summer, we celebrated together in Florida, in your headquarters, the acquisition or the collaboration with the Crowe LLP. But in Israel, we're more familiar with the Big Four. So Serge, please let us know you a little better and Crowe.
Sure, thanks. And it was, as you noted, interesting going from a 50-person incident response cyber intelligence firm to a 7,000-person global company. But you're trying to take that incident response background, 25 years of doing cyber intelligence and forensics and IR relating to nation-state attacks, critical infrastructure, organized crime certainly, and translating that into something at a global scale. It's been a lot of fun over the last 12 months.
Can you elaborate a little about the Crowe LLP? We know the Big Four. This is the Big Eight, which is still a club that you want to be part of, trust me. So can you a little elaborate before we dive into cyber issues about working in such a global corporate and later on we'll talk about the plans here in Israel and with the Israeli cyber.
I think it's been a great balance between, again, that 50-person company being able to snap my fingers and have something done, and all of a sudden the entire company changes directions. Certainly get into a Big Four space, and obviously great capabilities and great service providers, but just have a little bit more weight behind them. And Crowe has been a great partner for us in that they're able to provide that global perspective, 136 countries or something doing operations, and I think 16,000 people around the world, but still able to move nimbly and respond to some of the cyber threats that we're seeing, but also the incident response and the technical capabilities that we brought to the team.
So 2025, on the verge of 2026, why cyber is still such a major concern and such a measure that a big company, a big corporate, global corporate like Crowe swallow a cyber firm and get globally with this?
$10 trillion, I think somebody mentioned earlier today, $10 trillion of global cyber impact and 40 milliseconds. Those are my two big numbers there. One, 10 trillion in impact, but 40 millisecond round trip between here and Moscow and here in Beijing. And just the ability to impact things globally at the millisecond level. For those of us that traveled here and spent hours and hours on an airplane, to be able to be anonymous, to be able to have asymmetric warfare certainly is a concern. And interesting, as the Prime Minister was relating earlier, you start getting into the intersection between cyberspace and physical world. As Russia was starting to go into Ukraine, they made a very clear statement. They said a red line was going to be that their space frontier and satellites, and they said that is off limits, do not target space. The first thing they went after was Viasat for all of the uplinks into space. So not quite that red line, but it was that interesting connection between logical and physical, and certainly disrupted communications in Ukraine, but also then all across Europe. 40,000 subscribers and 5,000 wind generators, and all disrupted in communication. So that's why cyber is still the battleground, and really a growing battleground, but personally also interested in it from the opportunities that it presents. So I think it's like the dichotomy between the offense, and then a friend of mine injured in a snowboarding accident years ago and ended up as a quadriplegic with some biometrics and neuromuscular inputs, just stood up and walked down the aisle to her wedding And so when you start looking at what the opportunities are for cyber and AI and everything we've been talking about, we really need to figure out how to do a better job holistically defending this and making us able to use cyber effectively.
Speaking of which, well, we see, you mentioned, we all quote the number $10 trillion in maybe more damage, direct, indirect damage because of cyber. And we are here in the land of milk, honey, and cyber. So many solutions, so many companies promising, we saw some of them earlier, we see later. How come it's still something that needs a solution or a different solution? How come still ransomware attacks? How come still a good business or job security for us defenders?
It was really interesting. We were responding to a hospital incident recently, and in that hospital incident, the very steps that we were taking from a containment perspective created problems with the tools that we were using. So hit with ransomware, I'm going to disconnect the network, I'm going to start trying to contain systems and shut things down, but then I lose visibility and access to my identity providers and to my EDR systems and all of these things. So I think we are a little bit short-sighted sometimes in coming up with these solutions, but not realizing that we, in our crisis, when we actually need them the most, that some of our first steps are then impacting the ability that we have to respond. And then also in the investigation of those attacks, so we start investigating and the hospital's ready to respond and ready to turn things back on, but realizes that they can't use any of their backup tools and all of these other things that are supposed to be ready in a heartbeat until they figure out how the threat actors got in and how they're spreading through the environment and how we're going to get back to controlling the systems. So the investigation then slows the recovery operations, and now we're stuck in this process where ambulances are being diverted and these other big issues. So still today, when we look at the root cause, we get down to it was a business issue at the end of the day. Doctors saying, I can't use multi-factor authentication because I'm busy saving lives. I don't have time. So security and cybersecurity and cyber defenses end up having too much friction to be able to defend against or to provide the security around the solutions. And then our own processes for containment, investigation, recovery get in the way of continued business operations. So unfortunately, it's the drag and the balance between security and business that still brings us here today.
The brakes and the gas in every car, yes. So what do you want to press more? If you press that, without that, you're going to have a pretty lousy accident. So can you elaborate a little more about the Crowe offering? This is first time Crowe appears here in Israel, and it's a good opportunity to state or to address this fine audience. What are the plans? What are you looking for? And trust me, worth listening. Those who are both sides of customers and vendors.
Yeah, I think it's something that we can all be thinking about and we should all be working on, whether Silent, Crowe, PwC, pick your poison, but it's something that we can all be thinking about and working on. That is that we have to approach this problem differently. We can't approach this from a pure cyber perspective. We can't approach this from a purely business and technology perspective. And I like to think from a technology perspective, if we can look at how we are creating a feedback loop between all of our operations. So if things are centered around data and business, then we heard this morning about artificial intelligence and LLMs and NPCs and all of the ways that we're trying to access that data better and provide better business. And one of the things that I've been working on hard inside of the Crowe ecosystem is really to develop an incident response informed, business aware cyber strategy and strategy in general. One of the great pieces that I would encourage everyone to be looking at is how can you bring a friend to the table? Because if we just look at it and I just say, I'm going to fix this problem from a cyber perspective, then I'm not addressing what the doctor cares about with saving lives. and operating systems. If I'm looking at it just from a financial perspective and I'm trying to maximize profitability, then I'm slowing down, whether it's technological adoption or defenses or whatever that might be. So inside of Crowe, we've been spending an awful lot of time working and developing the same feedback loop and connections internally, so that when we are showing up to an incident response matter, we're also bringing with us some of the audit team, the tax team, the finance teams, to really understand that business model and be able to provide that better service. And it's been a bit of a differentiator, and certainly from Silent's perspective, purely as that incident response firm, it's been great to be able to have an expert in finance and somebody that understands audit, because what I found over the years is engineers make terrible auditors, but auditors make terrible engineers. And if we can find that connection and bring a friend with us, and in everything that we're thinking about, trying to develop a solution that includes cyber, that's built into concepts. And we can talk, cybersecurity, we can talk about, we need security by design, and we need privacy by design, and that means the engineers and the security teams need to get together. But something that certainly with, again, getting back to Crowe, with the audit teams and the regulatory teams and the framework teams, having all of that background, combine it with the M&A and the due diligence teams and the banking teams, and you connect that into cybersecurity, we've got a prayer of solving an issue. But it's something that we can all do regardless of companies.
It takes a village, right, to raise a kid and to solve cyber problems. And you have the village. In the short time that is left, and again, it's very impressive that you didn't mention quantum computing yet, but this is the opportunity. A quick glance in your idea, what is coming next? You have a few decades of experience in cybersecurity, and we had a lot of talks about it. What are the 2 or 3 major trends that will affect cybersecurity in the coming years?
It's been interesting. I was in a discussion with some of the people from our DHS and DOD, and we were talking about cyber, and we need faster computers, and we need to be concerned about collect now and decrypt later, and quantum computing, and all of these issues. And I was comparing cybersecurity to a slow-moving train wreck, in that we know what's happening, we know the train is coming, we know the problem's occurring, we know this thing is coming down the road. We heard Kevin, Mandia, that we've got all our keys on the table in our house, so we know this is coming, and we're just we continue to do the same thing. And I think that's what's coming next, hopefully, is that we start to think about this a little bit more holistically and planning for the future, so that we're making better tomorrows. And in one of the ways to do that, we just need to realize that threat actors are able to grab data now that's not encrypted. So they will take it, rather than worrying about grab now, decrypt later. It's the simple things, the gaps that we have in our defenses. So if we can be asking those questions, if we can ask, where are the gaps? How are the threat actors going to get in here? And try to fix those problems, that will allow us to address whatever the problems are of tomorrow.
Well, with this optimistic notion, thank you very much, Serge. Thank you for being with us. Please stay a little longer for the last part before lunch. Thank you.
Thanks.